Welcome to Not Good Enough Stuff. I'm Mary Beth Fox, licensed professional counselor, and every week we'll question the messages planted by family, society, culture, and life experiences that shaped your identity and became the voice in your head. We'll explore how you got where you are, why you learned to see yourself the way you do, and call bullshit on the messages that were never true in the first place. Because who you are and who you were shaped to be are not always the same. You will learn ways to begin returning to your true soul identity. Have you ever said, "I'm so mad I could cry"? Have you ever cried because you were mad? What is underneath that? Well, I think, just like everything I talk about pretty much, is that it comes from childhood. What were you taught as a child about crying? Were you taught that crying was weak? I know that I was taught that, and the majority of my clients and the majority of people whom I know were also taught that crying was weak. So what happens to a child when they are taught that crying is a sign of weakness? Well, a child is going to do everything they can not to cry because they certainly don't want to be weak. So think about your own childhood for a minute and think about times that were really difficult for you and times that it would be normal for a child to cry. Did you cry during those times? If you cried, did you hide it from others? Who did you hide it from? If you didn't cry, what did you do? How did that affect you? I know that we have all heard the saying, if you keep crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Or wipe those tears up. Or you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Why are you crying? Stop crying. Those messages are part of our not good enough stuff. Those feelings of not being good enough that come from the messages that we hear in childhood from family, society, and culture. And when we hear those messages over and over and over, then they become part of our identity. And we believe that that is who we are. And we shape our behaviors and everything about us based on what we are told about how we should be. So when a child hears over and over that they shouldn't be crying, that they are weak, or there is something wrong with them for crying, then they are going to grow up learning that they should never cry. And so that is a lifetime of holding in tears or hiding it or being ashamed of crying. But there are massive issues with this mentality that crying is weak because we are supposed to cry. If we weren't supposed to cry, then why in the hell do we have tears? Why does sadness exist? If it weren't supposed to exist, then that wouldn't even be a feeling. But this is what happens when people aren't taught that it is okay to be sad. Then they think that there is something wrong with them when they are sad. And so if you're not supposed to be sad and you're not supposed to cry, then what the hell are you supposed to do? Well, hide that shit, don't you know? Isn't that what you're supposed to do, right? Don't let anybody see you cry. Well, that is so damaging because we then have all of this sadness from a very young age that we have just pushed down and pushed down and pushed down, but it never has a place to release. So what happens when something keeps building up and building up and building up and never has an opportunity to release? Well, that shit explodes. So, what does that look like for you? How many times have you completely lost your shit over something that seemed so small? Have people looked at you and be like, what's wrong with her? Why did he act like that? That wasn't even a big deal. Why did he just, lose his shit? Man, what's wrong with him? Ooh, stay away from her. Think about that. Was it really this small thing that cued anybody to lose their shit? I don't think so. What I think is we, since childhood, have covered up all of our sadness and buried it and buried it and buried it, and not allowed ourselves to cry in the ways that we need and as often as we needed, that it just gets to the point where we have no more space for any more sadness. And so that sadness has been held in for so long, it's like you just shake it up. And it could be, an ant crossing the top of that would be, the final thing. And that little bitty tiny ant shakes it up, and everything underneath comes exploding out. But you can't even recall what all was underneath that. And so it looks like it was this one minor precipitating event in which you just completely lost your shit on. But it was so much more than that. It was years of all these difficult things that you have been through that you weren't allowed. Either you didn't allow it because you were taught it wasn't acceptable, or other people told you that it wasn't, or combination of both of those. And so you just continued hiding all of that, and it explodes. So what happens for us after we lose our shit from this small thing, supposedly? What happens for you after that? Shame. Shame takes over and becomes so big. And you just feel so embarrassed about losing your shit. And then other people probably shame you too, and, sit around and talk about you. Oh, her and her temper, or he really just, exploded over something so stupid. Oh, or, oh, they're so sensitive. Oh my gosh, you can't say anything or do anything. And then that just makes your shame bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you step back and you're trying to figure out why you responded in such a huge way to something that wasn't really that big of a deal. Again, it is because you have not given yourself permission all of this time, all the way since childhood, for the most part, to cry, express your sadness, and let that out in healthy ways. So it's going to come out in some way. And the chances are it's not ever going to be in a healthy way. But what if we could let ourselves cry, and cry in front of others without shame? Now, when you were taught that that was not acceptable, that can be a really difficult thing to do, because your inner critic is going to be spinning and spinning and spewing all of these nasty things about how you shouldn't do that, and how they're going to judge you, and they're going to think you're weak, and all of these different things that you were taught from family, society, and culture about why you shouldn't cry in front of others. But this is why I also think so many of us do not cry in front of people. Because a lot of times, if you have cried in front of somebody and they didn't know what to do with it, then you're left either taking care of their feelings and try to reassure them that you're okay, that you just don't even know what happened and you're fine. Or then you get so embarrassed about crying because they didn't know what to do with that. Well, it's not your responsibility to caretake somebody else when you are struggling. But this is what I believe. I believe that we are not taught what to do when somebody else is sad. And when we aren't taught what to do with something like that, then it's going to make us uncomfortable. And what do we do when we're uncomfortable? Anything and everything to stop that feeling of being uncomfortable. So if somebody is sad and we're uncomfortable with that, we are going to shut that shit down. So think about a time maybe that you went to somebody and you were sad and maybe even cried. What did they do? How did they respond? Did they tell you, well, hey, you need to get out of the house. Let's go see a movie. Oh, let's go do this. Oh, you just need to do that. Did any of that ever help? I know it never helped for me, and I know that it never helped for any of the people whom I've worked with, because it is shutting down their feelings. And it is telling them that how they are feeling and what they are expressing is wrong, and that they shouldn't do that because the other person is uncomfortable. But what if we were taught not to try to change somebody when they were sad or crying? What if we were taught that we could just let them be where they are? Let them cry. Let them talk about why they are sad, and just sit there and let them be right in that place. Before we continue, if today's episode is resonating with you, I've created a free therapist-written guide to help you understand where your not good enough beliefs came from and why they've stayed with you for so long. You can download it free at theinnerchildtherapist.com. Now, let's get back to today's episode. How different would our world be if we didn't try to change people who were sad? My thoughts on that is that if more people could sit with us and allow us to express our sadness and cry when we need to, then that sadness would not last as long, because a need would be met to be heard, accepted, comforted, and I hate this saying because it's too cliche and trendy, but space would be held for us, and we would know that we were safe to feel and express that sadness. That is what so many people need. But I'm not telling anything new to you, because you know that is not what most people get, because most people aren't taught that, and most people don't know what to do with it. And I'm not faulting them, because how are you supposed to learn something that you were never taught? It's a difficult thing to do. But I do think that this is responsible for so much anger in the world. We just don't recognize that anger is so very often repressed sadness that was never allowed to exist and be expressed. And so again, it builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, and then bam, that shit fucking explodes. And then again, here comes the shame and everything that goes with that. And again, we don't know what to do with that. So then there's more sadness that comes with that, and tuck that and hide that away again until it builds and builds and builds. And guess what? Bam, another explosion into anger. That is what happens when we are taught that sadness and crying is weak. But if that is something that is still stuck in your head, or if that is something that you have been told, I really want you to think long and hard about this question. If crying is weak and being sad is weak, then why the hell is it hard to do? If it's weak, then anybody should be able to do it. Should be easy, right? No. Showing sadness and crying and being vulnerable is hard as hell, and that is why so few people can actually do it. To me, being able to cry and show sadness to others takes so much strength. Yeah, strength, not weakness. So think back to some times in your life when maybe you did cry to others. How was that handled? How did you feel afterwards? Also, think about where you learned the messages that you heard about being sad and crying. Now, I also want you to think about, what did you learn about anger? I know that I learned that anger was a hell of a lot more acceptable than sadness was. If somebody was sad, that was going to make somebody uncomfortable, so don't be sad. But if they're angry, okay, blow up, scream, shout, whatever. Everybody's aware that somebody is angry. So what do we do with them when they're angry? Leave them alone. Right? Whoop, they're angry. Hey, don't go near so-and-so. She's angry today. Just leave him alone. You don't want to be around him today. He's angry. And it's not like we are saying that this person is weak. It's just we're identifying, oh, okay, yep, they're angry. Okay. Whatever, leave them alone. But if they were sad, everybody would get really uncomfortable and, oh, what do we do? But when we're taught that it's more acceptable to be angry than it is sadness, then that is where we go. We go to what is acceptable. We go to what more people are comfortable with to protect them, right? But here's the issue of when somebody is angry and we leave them alone. Now, I'm not talking about when somebody is angry and there's potential for violence. Absolutely leave them alone. Do what you've got to do to keep yourself safe. But I'm talking about when somebody is really angry and we leave them alone. Again, I don't really think it's anger most of the time. It is sadness underneath. And when we are sad, what we actually need is connection. We need to be heard and validated and comforted and to know that it is okay to feel what we feel. But when we are angry, we get the exact opposite. And then our needs continue to not be met. And so when the real feeling is sadness, that anger is what's going to present, which means that sadness never has a place to go to. And it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're back to that cycle of it being hidden and hidden and hidden and repressed more and more and more, that one little thing is going to tip us over the edge and we explode. And then, the rest of the story. So think about people you've kind of labeled in your mind as angry. Have you ever seen them sad? Have you ever seen them crying? Have you ever heard them express feelings of sadness? If the answer is yes, it's probably not often. And I think that the majority of time, when we think of somebody who is angry, we don't ever consider them to be sad because they present as anger. So that's what we see and that's how we label them. But what if we could start sitting with people who are angry and talking about sadness and allowing them to feel safe to be sad? I think that could change so much in the world. What do you think? Do you think that if we could feel safe and it be acceptable to be sad and cry, that there would be less anger in the world? I do. And now, if we would be able to teach that to children, think about all the adults generations from now who would not be exploding on each other, who would not, somebody look at them the wrong way or have a different political view. And that trigger things in their childhood of not being heard, validated, whatever it is. It was really sadness. And so they explode into anger and we have all this hate and, slamming somebody on this and back and forth and all of that. What if children started being taught and allowed to cry and be sad? I think that could heal so many things in the world. Now, yes, I'm aware that there are many people out there who were allowed to be sad and who are allowed to cry, and that there are a lot of parents who are allowing their children to do that. I'm one of those. But what I am talking about is people in my generation and older, and maybe a generation below me, and maybe still some people now, actually, who are still taught that crying is weak. Don't be sad. And I think that that's where our growth is, to start changing how we view crying and sadness, because being sad, expressing it and sharing that and talking about it and crying is hard as hell. And that to me is a sign of massive strength. As I mentioned, this coming from your childhood and what children learn and how that follows them into adulthood. I want to be really clear. The goal isn't to blame your childhood for every adult reaction. It's to become curious about what you learned and what you were allowed to and not allowed to feel as a child, and how that shaped you throughout your life. As I wrap up, I want you to consider, instead of asking, why am I so angry? Try asking, what might be underneath my anger that I never learned how to feel? And as always, you are good enough, you always were, and you always will be. If this episode helped you see yourself differently, I'd love for you to follow my podcast and leave a review. It helps more people discover the Not Good Enough Stuff framework and these conversations. New episodes are released every Tuesday. If you need reminders between episodes to keep questioning the messages that shaped you, follow me on social media at The Inner Child Therapist. You'll also find my blog, newsletter, and free resources at theinnerchildtherapist.com. All of the links are in the show notes. Remember, you are not lost. Your true soul identity is still there. And the voice in your head isn't always yours. Question it. I'll see you next Tuesday.